Welcome to Survivor Global on Reality Pop. We're doing an international rewind today on Australian Survivor Champions versus Contenders 2. And I've got a very special guest here with me today, Adam Jimba, who you may know from some of the previous podcasts that we've already done on the channel. And also he is one of the two Survivor buffs talking about US Survivor on our channel. And today he's actually going to dive into International Survivor for the very first time. So I'm very excited to hear about Adam's thoughts. Adam, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to be on here. If you guys didn't check out the panel we did a couple of days ago on why you should watch International Survivor, go check it out. If you haven't, this is my first time watching a Survivor episode, let alone an entire season that isn't American Survivor. So I've always wanted to dive in. So this gave me a great excuse to finally do that. And I'm glad I did. I'm happy to come and talk about the first couple episodes here.
Excellent. Well, I think one of the things that stood out for me in this episode, and myself and Adam, we had a very brief conversation about this before we went live, was how different, I guess, and similar the International Survivor is to the US season. And one of the things that stands out for me as I watch Champions versus Contenders, and this is my second time watching it, so for me it's a bit of a rewatch, is kind of how they hype it up against Champions versus Contenders 1. They talk about the fact that it's the oldest grudge match on reality TV in Australia, and the previous time we had a champion take it out, and will a contender rise to the top to do it this time? And it's kind of like a little bit of a trailer that you get in the beginning. To me, it felt very epic, and it felt like I was watching a movie. Did you feel similar?
Yeah, it felt like a sequel to a movie, and I don't know if that cinematic quality is there for all the different seasons of Australian Survivor, but that was probably the first, because I was trying to watch it not only to take notes of what was happening, obviously for this recap, but also I was trying to take notes of comparing and contrasting to American Survivor. And probably the first note that I took was, wow, this show is cinematic. Not only widescreen and like just the shots they had with like the beams of light coming down from the clouds to illuminate the steam coming from the jungle. And they really went all out.
Yeah, and I'm glad I've got you here as someone that is into like film production and all that kind of thing. So you definitely noticed the things that I probably skipped over, but definitely it is something that Australian Survivor focuses on a lot. And it's one of the things that really differentiates it from Survivor US and also the Survivor South Africa franchise that is out there. Now, as they bring these contestants in and you start learning about who the different people are that are going to be forming part of the season, they focus on the champions, and we see a returning player, Luke Toki, come back to play again, and he is in that People's Champions bracket for the Champions tribe. And I've got to be honest, the first time I watched this season, I was so nervous for Luke coming back playing again, because you've got to understand, I know some people hate me or love me for it. I'm a Russell Hantz fan, and I saw Russell Hantz play in that exact same spot the season before in Champions versus Contenders 1, and he was a massive target from the start, which you can't compare threat levels, because, I mean, we all know Russell is a massive threat. But Luke is also a massive threat, and he's someone who's played the game before. It made me super nervous in regards to how he would do the first time I watched it, because I really didn't want him to have that same trajectory that some of my favorite players in the past, like a Russell or a Tony Vlachos or someone like that, have had, that is a similar big personality character that are known to be able to play strategically really well. That is, and in his case, he is super good at the social game, as we will continue to go on how he socially makes those connections. We also find out that there's going to be a couple of other really famous people, obviously, on this tribe. We've got Abby, who's a women's AFL player, very popular over in Australia. We've got E.T., who is the National Rugby League star, and he's also got Fishing with E.T. as a TV show over in Australia, which is really popular. And we've got people like Ross in there as well. And Ross, to me, from the start, I just looked at this guy and thought, he's going to be a wild card, somebody that serves on those massive waves and takes those massive risks, in life. They're not going to be someone that's going to want to play this game safe. We also get someone like a Pia in there who's an actress, and we find out that Pia is a legitimate fan of the show. She watched it from the first seasons and has been a really big fan and wanted to play it. So I think with a lot of these, and I don't know if there's anybody else that sort of stood out for you in those initial stages, but I think from all of the champions that we see play the game, there isn't many that are actually massive fans of the show prior to playing. I think a lot of them comes in as casuals in this show. Is there anybody else that sort of stood out for you in that opening sequence when they start introducing the champions?
Well, I wanted to ask real quick, how big is because I feel like they did a good job at showing some of the sports players and the impact they had. And obviously, I think it was Daisy who had called a few of them out. How big is Pia? Like, is she a pretty well known actress, or is she kind of like a B-lister, or like how big is she?
So in the Australian circles, she's played, I believe, and listen, I'm definitely not the expert on all things Pia in Australia. And I'll be honest, when I watched it the first time, I didn't know who she was. But then again, I live in New Zealand and I've lived in Australia, but I don't really watch a lot of the more soapy type of shows like Days of Our Lives or The Bold and the Beautiful and that kind of thing. But I think she played in something similar to that extent over in Australia. And I believe she's also played in some Australian movies. So she is really well known by people in Australia, and they would have definitely known who she was right from the start. So I think the people that immediately were recognizable to those who were on the show were E.T. I don't know how recognizable Abby was, but I do know that women's football is quite a big thing over there. And okay. I think Pia would have been recognized immediately, and Stephen was the other person that Daisy recognized, which was quite funny. I don't know if you've ever seen the video about the Olympic skaters that go around the circle and then you've got like 3 skaters that fail in front of them and this one guy just comes from the back and wins. That's him. So he's very famous on YouTube. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's Stephen, and he becomes a really big character in this episode as well, and we'll talk about a lot of the strategy and what he drives a little bit later on, I guess, in the show. Obviously, Luke immediately gets recognized by all of the contenders because you can just tell that within the contenders tribe, there is a lot of fans. And we get introduced early to obviously Daisy. Daisy is your like you would say, all-American, all-Australian farm girl over there, and just the girl next door, and someone that they can relate to very easily. That's why when me and you spoke about Daisy, who will come on the show at some stage and talk to us, and you asked me, who does Daisy who in the American Survivor would she be the closest to? And I said, for me, it's extremely hard to actually even put her in that category with any of the American survivors. But I feel like in some ways, maybe a Jeffra, but she's way more vocal than Jeffra and she gets a lot more screen time. But that farm girl type of category, I would say,
Yeah, you know who she actually reminded me of? It was Sierra, the blonde model from Tocantins, who was kind of Tyson's biggest enemy. She kind of reminded me a bit of her.
Interesting. And I haven't seen Tocantins in such a long time. So for me, it's kind of hard to, because I do remember Sarah, but I remember her being super annoying, or she was being portrayed as being super annoying throughout the whole season. I don't feel like that Daisy comes across as annoying to her tribe mates as much as Sierra did in those early days. Then I guess in that first sequence, we also see John. They focus on him a bit, the gold miner from WA. And I feel like when they looked at this cast, they thought, who's the most like everyday Australian, down to earth girl next door we can get, and they chose Daisy. And they thought, who's the everyday Aussie bloke? And they chose John. So he fits the stereotype of the everyday blue collar, hardworking Aussie man, basically. And you can just see he's going to be a bit of a wild card. And obviously we're going to get into some of the things he does throughout the show. But someone that I also believe do really well in challenges and is just really hardworking. So the first challenge right off the bat, what they need to do is they fight for a bag and they wrestle for this. So it's a very physical altercation right from the start, and they have to drag it back into their end zone to get a score for their team. And there's a lot of talk right from the start that, we've got the young and fit team, you've got the older team. There's a lot of, and I immediately thought of Gideon as I was watching all 3 of these episodes, and I thought Gideon would absolutely hate Australian Survivor because he does not like crap talking or shit talking between teams or any of that kind of stuff. He mentioned he didn't like that Wendell did it. Wendell would do well. He would fit in with these guys because he would be able to give it back. What did you think about that dynamic?
Yeah, and yeah, Wendell's a big fan of Australian Survivor. Yeah, I was. That's one of the things I was curious because, like I said, I haven't seen any other seasons. I was curious if sort of like the cockiness back and forth. Although some of the smack talking between the teams sort of felt friendly. Like every time someone kind of talked smack, it seemed like it was with a smile. Especially with Luke, seemed like you could always tell it was like kind of playful banter, even if he believed he was going to win in his deepest of hearts. It always kind of felt playful. But yeah, you just don't see maybe in some of the earlier seasons of Survivor. But yeah, once like idols and strategy came into play with Survivor, and you realize that like every word that comes out of your mouth is going to be used, for you or against you. Your game. I think everyone is so very conscious of the words that come out of their mouth in American Survivor. So it's interesting. Here in Australian Survivor, everyone's a bit more looser, with how they want to be perceived. So it's an interesting dynamic. I wasn't expecting that for sure.
So with this first challenge, they're playing for a survival startup kit, some food, and I guess it's got some sort of a fire starter kit in there as well, which we know in Survivor that's massive because to be able to make fire without flint is not something that's very easy to do. There's only a few people that have been able to achieve that in Survivor history, and we do end up with the champions pulling it off. But one of the things that sort of stood out for me here was that the men really struggled against the men in the Contenders tribe, and that the women were the ones that actually pulled it through with the win for them at the end. I think that Abby, Anastasia, and E.T., they were the three that scored some points there for their team. And like E.T. is, he was nearly out of breath after that first part. It was quite an interesting one where, again, they said he was old and over it, but he caught his breath and still managed to beat Andy within the other tribe. Now, going into the actual camp life in the Champions tribe after this, we get Luke saying that this is deja vu for him. He feels like he's back on the island where he belongs. Everything's the same, but it's yet so different because he's there with the senior citizens. And he says that, he's very afraid that so very observant from the start, he's very afraid that the senior citizens, the sporting people, they will band together very quickly in the beginning and form a senior citizenship alliance. And he said E.T. would be the leader of the alliance, handing out the wrinkling cream. And I remember the first time watching that, and I was absolutely cracking up because it's only Luke that would say something like that. But very observant there from him right from the start, noticing that he is going to potentially be on the outs. And I think a lot of the time when we look at those early dynamics, it's kind of like when you come from a specific state in the US and you find yourself in another state, or you're from somewhere like the same country and you're in a different country and you see someone else from the same country, immediately you gravitate towards that person. And it becomes very tribal-like in that sense. And I think that naturally the sporty people, the older people, they are going to stick together. And we even saw a little bit of this being an issue in Winners at War, where the cast was a lot older. So people like a Nick Wilson and a Michelle and a Wendell, they were finding it a little bit harder to fit in if they didn't have kids already or they weren't that much older. What did you think of the early sort of stages of camp life there with the champions and how the alliance sort of evolved? Because Steve was the one who started that with the 7.
Yeah, no, it was definitely interesting. And yeah, Luke, one thing that's interesting about this dynamic is comparing to American survivors, when they bring back a person like Luke, they always like to be very balanced in their tribes. If there's 5 men, there's got to be 5 women. If there's 5 older people, there's got to be 5 younger people. If there's a returnee, the other tribe's got to have a returnee. If that returnee is an injured, a medevac player, the other returnee's got to be a medevac. So it was interesting that Luke was the one returning player for this season. So that added an interesting dynamic for sure. And part of that early part of learning the tribe was obviously getting to know like the backstories, which I'm as a only watching US, I just wasn't used to. And of course, in learning the backstories, you learn of the common. Oh, I think one of your panels is peeling off behind you. You kind of learn that a lot of those champions are similar in the backstories. Like obviously they come from different sports, from different, I'm assuming, parts of the country, but they all are kind of retired I don't think any of the champions were like active sports players. So a lot of them, kind of are past their heyday. So
Yeah.
seeing them naturally come together made sense. Like not knowing who the different, I guess, types of people in Australia are. That was a common thing that I, as someone not from that country, and have never been or know anyone that's from there, was able to see like the natural cohesion between those champions. So, but
Yeah.
every season of Survivor, you're going to have your majority alliance, and that one formed pretty quickly. So.
Yeah, and I mean, we've got to give credit to Stephen, the Olympic gold medalist, the skater, because he's the one who, so he came in and he said, listen, what a lot of people don't realize, they think I was lucky at winning that, but there's a lot of strategy that goes into winning something like that. And it's interesting because he does come across as the most strategic person within that. Well, him and Nova comes across as the two more strategic people within that 7-person sporty alliance, but he's the one who sort of puts the troops together to actually form this alliance. But he's very smart in the sense that he doesn't want to be the leader. He wants ET to be the leader. So he wants to put it together, but then step backwards because he understands that if he's in the front, he's gonna get the bullets flying his way. Now, for the immunity challenge, there's more of the rivalry between the two tribes going on prior to the actual immunity challenge starting, and there's the whole talk about them being old and the younger tribe's going to do better. So I got a little bit of deja vu with both millennials versus Gen X and David versus Goliath in one season here because it's the champions versus contenders and it's old versus young. We do end up seeing
a lot. He really Matt from. I said I was very impressed with Matt. He from the very first challenge, he seems to be a leader, particularly when it comes to those like challenges, encouraging his team, and then like standing up to these big figures like Luke. I like his passion for the game for sure. So he's a character I'm interested to see going forward for sure.
Yeah, and he's very much made to be the poster boy for the contenders throughout because he keeps talking about the fact that the champions have had their time. This time, a contender needs to win at the end, and I'm here to make sure that a contender is going to win it. And the rivalry that starts developing between Luke, Toki, and Matt is a very interesting one because in those 101 throughout the 3 episodes, we see them go up against each other 101 quite a bit. With Luke being a little bit more low key, but Matt really trying to antagonize Luke throughout the episode and get some sort of a reaction from him, which when you think back about that podcast we had with Rob and we spoke about why I think we should watch International Survivor, I did say that Australians are fascinating to watch because they're such hardcore players when it comes to competition and sports, and they will do the banter and talk people out of a game and do the shit talk, like they say, inside of the game. But outside of it, they'll go and shake your hand. They're really good sportsman-like people. But it's kind of just within the culture, and you see that playing out. Now, on this immunity challenge, it's a very physical cause, but it ends up at the end with being something that you have to throw hatchet at targets. And Andy's part, we kind of skipped over it a little bit. He also gets a very big edit within these first 3 episodes, and he gets put through, and this is the person who's the marketing executive lying about the fact that he's a golf blogger online, and he says, he's a massive fan of the show. He's seen every single season internationally and US and everything. And in fact, one of the interesting things, I do remember when the season was live, Rob has a podcast, Rob mentioned that Andy went to some of his live events in the States. So he's that big of a fan that he would go to these kind of events and meet survivors even before he played, so he went into this
a little bit.
Adam Klein. Yeah. I feel like the intensity that he brings to the show is something that really stands out. Even his communication with people, he's super intense. If I was there as a person, I saw this intense person coming up to me, I don't know how I would feel about that. But he's saying all of the right things, though. He knows that as a super fan. And I love the fact that they did the clip back to where he was preparing for the show, and he had all these obstacles in his own backyard that he was shown as doing the throwing challenges, doing the one where you have to extend the stick to get the key. He was doing all this practice and training because that's pretty intense for someone to go through all that before they even go in the show, and it shows his knowledge and how prepared he wanted to be going into the show. I think the thing that stands out, and we'll go back to Andy a little bit later on because he does form part of a bit of strategy later on. The thing that stood out for me here is that he is the one that steps up to throw the hatchets at the end, and he absolutely nails it and kills it. So he's shown as at this stage being able to talk the talk, but also walk the walk and step up when it's needed. What did you think of him in this early stages of the game?
Yeah, it reminded me of Joe Anglim a little bit. I know Joe Anglim is obviously, I think, at this point, unanimously considered the greatest challenge beast of American Survivor. And not that he's not a naturally gifted athlete, but when Joe was preparing for his 3 separate seasons of Survivor, he did a similar thing where he rebuilt a lot of challenges in his family. His family owns a lot of property. I think there's like some construction workers in his family, so they were able to kind of build some challenges. So he practiced it. And I remember Fishback told me once that Joe was the first person who attempted to sort of master the game of Survivor outside of the game of Survivor. So it was interesting seeing Andy sort of try to tackle a similar thing. He of all the contenders, I would say Andy might be the one I'm the most drawn to in the first episode for sure. Yeah, he was probably the one I cling to the most.
And one of the things that's quite funny on Andy before we go into obviously the next part of this is that Andy said he wants to be the most dominant player to ever play the game. He's putting it out there. He wants to win the show and come back to an all-winner season in the US and win that as well. And this happened before all winners happened. So this was about, I think, 2 years before all winners. So he called it. So it's interesting that, you know, obviously we'll see how good he does and if he actually becomes the winner, but, you know, he called the whole all winners thing happening. And obviously, sadly, it didn't include all winners from all shows internationally and in the US, but, you know, who knows? Maybe someday, you know, we've got quite a few good winners outside of the US, and we still have some winners we haven't seen come back to play in the States. So I'd love to see it. I'm all for it. Now, they do really...
I just wanted to add, by the way, for those watching, so Chris is rewatching this. Like I said, I've never seen this season, and I also don't know where anyone places. I know the winner, and that's it. That's the only person I know. I have no idea where anyone else places in this season. So I'm hoping the people that I'm clinging to, like Andy and you know, later on John and Harry a little bit. I hope some of these people last because those are the ones I've been clinging to. But yeah, I have no clue where these people land. So.
Yep. So the immunity challenge is then won by the Contenders tribe. So it means that the champions go back to camp and now they have to go and do the scramble. So the part that we normally see a lot of within the US, the strategy starts kicking in. And again, the same thing is happening with Steven. Says he's comfortable. He goes for a little bit of a dip in the ocean. He doesn't need to do too much. He's got his 7 people lock and loaded. And he knows that the Sporty Alliance are going to stick together. We see the exact opposite with Luke. He knows he's in danger as, like you've mentioned, the one and only player to come back and play the game, and not being in that main alliance, he does fear that it's going to be someone in his group that is going to go home. And at this point, it looks like there's a counter alliance forming against the Sporty 7, and that's Luke, David, who's the international model. We didn't get to see too much of him in this first episode. It's Pia, and also Anastasia and Janine. Those are the people that are sort of in there. And Janine is, I don't know if you're familiar with Shark Tank over in the States. I know it's a big show in the States as well. So she's from the Shark Tank in Australia. She's one of the sharks. So Luke actually recognized her. Yeah, so Luke recognized her, and it's a really funny moment where she comes into the ocean in her bikini, and he says, "Now I know where you're from. You're from Shark Tank." And she said, "It took you for me to have my clothes off to know that." She's like, "That's disturbing." So it was a really funny moment between the two of them. But Luke also mentions that he's getting along with her really well, which is surprising because she's this, you know, boss lady that you wouldn't be able to think that she would be able to, you know, easily get along with everyone. But I think it is a strength of Janine in this early game. But anyways, the strategy talks start happening. So you've got Luke, Janine, David, Pia, Anastasia, and Nova, for some other reason, in the conversation by the water while talking to them about who's got to go next. And they're all targeting someone within the other tribe. They're targeting Susie as the person that they believe is the weakest, and they want to get her out. And as they're talking about this, Luke and David asks Nova, "What do you think about who should go?" And Nova doesn't have anything to say. What does that normally mean when something like that happens, Adam?
If she says, "I don't know," the first thing I would think in my head is she knows exactly who she's going to vote for. But it's either someone there or someone there is tight with that person.
Exactly. So, I mean, obviously, Luke, not being a first time playing, immediately knows Nova's not giving me any commitment here. She clearly isn't with us. She's not going to vote with us. So he does go and talk to her one on one, which I found really interesting that he still goes back to her one on one afterwards and said, "So who would you want to go for?" And he tries to talk her into still doing what he wants, but he realizes it's not going to move. Now, he finds out that at this stage, the early target for the 47 is Pia. And it does look like Luke is trying to save Anastasia. He's getting along with her really well. And the Minority Alliance is going to eat one of their own. They're going to focus on Pia. But Nova, on the other hand, she's not for the Pia vote, and she goes back and then flips the vote on their end to rather go after Anastasia. And I think some credit needs to be given to Pia in this situation, because Pia finds out that her head is on the chopping block. She's going home, and what she does really well is she goes and talks to the two ladies within the 47, Susie and Nova, and she says, "Listen, I'm not here to be a threat. I'm not here to run the game or be a mastermind or anything like that. I just want to have a good time. I'm easy to get along with. Anastasia on the other side, she's been seen throughout this first episode as a little bit of someone that goes head on head with Nova, and there's already that friction there. What did you think about Pia's strategy? Because a lot of people, they just give up when they hear their name, or they just don't know how to approach that.
Yeah, it was weird. I feel like most of what we saw of Pia's attempts to save herself was mostly told through her confessionals of how she was going to approach it and how she think her plan was working. I feel like we didn't really get to see her plan too much. I don't know if maybe they had enough footage there, or they were able to take the footage to build us in a story. But it seemed like she was at the bottom, and then she goes and kind of has all these different conversations with people, using this plan of kind of utilizing her acting skills she's learned over her career. And then, of course, as we'll see later on, the votes kind of switched more towards Anastasia. So I guess the plan worked. I feel like I would have liked to see a little bit more of those conversations, but at the same time, this episode already is I think it was like an hour 20. So I can kind of understand if they wanted to shave off some of that stuff. But based on what we saw, you can't be anything but impressed already with Pia at this point, for sure.
I think what happened there was that she didn't go to everyone. I don't think she went to the people that she couldn't relate to, which would have been the guys in that alliance. I think she went to the Nova and the Susie ones, and because they observed that Nova and Anastasia, there was friction there already. I think that she probably knew that there was a case to be made for it rather to be Anastasia, because Anastasia to me came across as someone that I think could have done really well in the show if she stayed, but she came across as someone that wanted to be a leader, and she had a very strong personality, where Pia was, at this stage, she's playing down her personality and lowering her threat level, saying, "Hey, I'm not here to challenge you guys," kind of thing. I think that's kind of what happened. But I don't know if she actually went to everyone. I think she worked through those two, and then we see Nova going back and convincing the team, like, "Listen, no, we should go the other way." So going on to,
that's impressive too, to not have to go to everyone, to only talk to, realizing I need this thing to happen, instead of having to go and talk to every single person in that alliance, knowing like the one or two people that you need to talk to kind of work your way in through the cracks. So props to Pia for finding those cracks and going about them the right 100%. Way. If there was an MVP for episode 1, I would probably give it to Pia.
Yeah, just because she was on the way out, right? So for her to be able to save us, I just think a lot of people they don't know how to save themselves in that situation. So you've got to give some credit there. So the tribal happens. We know Anastasia gets voted out. Is there anything specific about tribal itself that you want to discuss that stood out for you?
Not really. I mean, I don't know if eventually, if we're gonna have time to go into kind of talking about the host. What's the remind me of the host's name again?
Jonathan. Yeah, Jonathan.
Yeah, he's interesting. He's a bit different than Jeff, and I think because I'm a U.S. fan, I've seen Jeff for 20 years. I feel like no matter how good a host is, it's never going to be Jeff Probst. So I'm always like looking at him and picking like, oh, Jeff would do this better. Jeff would do this better. But I do like his kind of funny banter with some of the contestants at times, and I from an outsider looking in, he feels like a good representation of like the country. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's interesting, his kind of dynamics with everyone. But I feel like everyone's mind was pretty set coming into tribal council. I don't feel like this was a blind side by any means. I feel like Anastasia had a good hunch that she maybe not a good hunch that she was for sure coming home, but she definitely knew coming in that she was likely to go home. And when I wouldn't consider the first vote a blind side. I wasn't surprised by it.
No, but what I did find interesting by the vote was that right up until the end, you have the minority alliance sticking together and still going against Pia and voting for Pia. And then when we go into the next episode, you've got Pia ingratiating herself back into that minority alliance that have just voted against her, which again shows a lot of skill from Pia in this case, because she could have easily, a lesser player would have been like, no, you've just voted against me. I'm going to stay with the guys who've just voted with me, But Pia is self-aware enough of her position within the game to realize that the only way forward for her is to try and make it with this minority alliance, because the majority alliance are as thick as thieves. They're going to stick together and they're not going to break up,
For sure.
So we've got Pia literally won his season on the first council and paved the way for her underdog story. Yeah, so at the moment we believe Pia's playing an extremely good game, Jerome. So we do have Adam here who is watching this for the first time, and we may have some other people here watching it for the first time as well. But Pia's played a really, really good game up until this point. So going into this next part of the game, we see that there's a little bit more of the Contenders camp in this episode too. We see that Baden is being portrayed as the weakest link, and we start getting a bit of a backstory of Baden's story. So we know that he is studying the upper limits of the atmosphere. I couldn't completely write down what it was, but it's way above my head. Maybe you caught it. But obviously he's a very smart guy that's studying towards his PhD at uni. And he talks about the fact that, his whole life he's been a bit of an outsider. And he has struggled being an introvert to connect with people, and his journey on survival will be to show people that even if you're an outsider and an introvert, you can come on the show and do it. Does he give you Cochrane vibes?
In a way, in the sense that he's kind of like the nerdy guy, a bit out of his element. But when I think of Cochrane, the first thing I think of is the fact that he's such a super fan. If not to this day, still probably like the biggest super fan of the show's history. The fact that he wrote his thesis at college on the Survivor jury system, I think just puts him as like the top super fan to ever play the game. So I didn't really see that sense from Baden, but definitely kind of like the physically weaker, but still with a lot of passion and wanting to kind of be a face of his type of person, as we know Survivor casts often. So
I think I just think you offended Andy on a couple of different levels there. Isn't he the biggest super fan, according to him, to ever play the game? But anyways, so with this tribe, you see that Baden's the outcast. He's been seen as a weak link, and especially Matt is locked and loaded on Baden. He's saying, this is the guy we need to get out. He's going to drag us down. We want to win this whole thing, and we don't need people slowing us down. And on the other side, you see early on that Andy is trying to form some connections with Baden, talk to him about the show and specifically about the international version. I do think Baden is a big fan as well, but he is downplaying at this point the fact that he's watched a lot of these shows and he doesn't want to give it away. So you've got two super fans there talking to each other, not really wanting to give away how much they know about the game in those early stages. We also see within this period here that different relationships are starting to form with you've got Daisy, you've got Sean, who's also known as the horse, you've got Matt, and who was the other person in that group? That John, the gold miner. They're starting to form a group that is starting to form, and you've got people like Andy and Harry, the ice cream scooper from WA Perth. They are the two people that are realizing that there is an alliance forming within the tribe. What did you think about sort of Harry and Andy during this period, and especially Harry as he becomes a bit more visible as someone that could be strategic and start seeing these dynamics.
Yeah, as the throughout this second episode that we're on now, as Harry started popping up more and more, I sort of couldn't remember him at all in the first episode. And he kind of made that jump to being, I don't want to say like the Luke of the tribe, because Luke, I think at this point and in the next episode too, is so clearly like getting by far the most the screen time of any of the champions. I don't know if there is anyone that's quite yet that for the contenders. They're a bit more leveled out. But if there was one whose game I'm sort of following the most at this point, I feel like is really playing like to be honest, the best game. Obviously, we're not seeing everything. We're only seeing what the editors are showing us. But I really like Harry's game up until this point, kind of laying low for the first couple days and like slowly working his way into it. I know later on he sort of is tending to isolate some of the people that he's targeting, making it a little too obvious. But I do like Harry's game, and I'm starting to really want to follow him and John too as well, especially in that challenge where John has to help lift people over the walls, the structures.
Yes.
Yeah, John. I love John's intensity. I know John is also going to be coming on this podcast in a couple episodes. And when we were talking to him earlier, he said, "You sure you want to have me on? Because I'm not, I'm kind of known as the guy who like doesn't take it seriously." And then watching after this episode, I'm like, "What are you talking about, John? You seem like you were the hardest working guy in the challenges for your tribe out there." It's interesting.
It's exactly like the thing with John, and I think what he probably meant by that is that he's not seen as the strategic mastermind of any of these seasons. But I think that John is a solid player, and I think that if you look at John and you compare him to like an early Colby or like an early one of those type of players that are like Colby was the All American, he's the All Australian, and he's someone that's good at challenges. He's a good team player. I think he's a massive character, and I think John is underselling himself. He did come back for All Stars as well the season following this, so a little bit of a spoiler there. I'm not going to tell you where he's going to place in any of the seasons, so you can find that out for yourself. But he does come back as a big character. Him and Daisy both, for obvious reasons, they come back because they're so easy to identify with for people in the Australian public, and people love them on the show. So I understand definitely why they're big characters in the show. So we do go back to the Champions tribe a little bit as well. And finally, we're starting to hear something from David, because David was really quiet in that first episode. We didn't get much confessionals from him, but he mentions that, he's not a normal model, he's a supermodel, and that there's a difference between it. And we see him, I think it's like with Kirsten Stewart or something in one of those photos that played in Twilight. So like he's been in with some massive people on some of these covers. And David says that he's going to work the flirt card. So do we have our first male Parvati on Survivor?
It's interesting. I've never seen a player appear one way on episode 1 and just become like a completely different player on episode 2. I can't think of anyone who's kind of flipped that. He in episode 1 he kind of reminded me of I forget his name. I'm drawing a blank. The guy who placed second on Millennials versus Gen X, or I guess tied for second since Adam got all the votes.
Ken, yeah.
Yeah. Kind of like a hardworking guy.
Like Ken. Yeah, nothing like him.
Yeah, hardworking guy, really down to earth. Muscular, good-looking guy, nice to everyone. And then in episodes 2 and 3, he becomes a lot goofier. He has like this strategy. I'm just like, whoa, where did this guy come from? So David is like, if what I say, Johnny and Harry are kind of the guys I'm relating to the most, and I'm wanting to follow the most on the Contenders tribe. When it comes to champions, obviously it's going to be Luke, simply probably just because of the amount of screen time he's getting, and because of this, thing that happens in episode 3 that we'll get to in a second. But David for sure is someone who really impressed me in episode 2. So I'm interested to see the rest of his game.
And we see the friendship forming in this one between him and Luke. And Luke had his person that he played with in the first season. I don't want to spoil how he did, but that person did pretty well. So he's now forming with this person here, which is Dave, and you can immediately see why they would want to team up, because they both have that goofy, playful side within them, and it's very interesting the strategy that's being used here by Dave to just sort of play the flirt card, get close to Abby to try and pull Abby in, and Luke, on the other hand, is then he's tasked with sort of focusing on Ross and trying to pull Ross in, which we see more of over the next episode as well. But I thought it was really interesting coming up.
Which season did Luke? Did he play the last season or two?
No, so Luke's first season was the second season of Australian Survivor on Channel 10. So it would have been season 3 if you count the other 2 for Channel 7 in there. And he went pretty far in that one as well. But he came into the season kind of knowing where he needs to pivot his game slightly, and he amended his game in some ways there. And we could definitely talk about that off here. I don't want to spoil things for people if they haven't seen that season yet, but it was a very good season to watch as well. And he's a good enough player to come back and be the People's Champion, have that title as People's Champion. Now, for the first challenge on this episode, it is a physical challenge with a beam that players have to push from both sides. And again, I think it just comes down to, I don't think we need to go into too much detail on this challenge, but it comes down to the men really struggling on this once again and not being able to. Matt and Luke team up against each other again, and Matt, for the second time in a row, gets the better of him and continues to antagonize Luke throughout this. And so you're really seeing that rivalry is there between them, like it's a friendly rivalry, but it's there. And at the moment, Luke is on the short end of that the whole time. And you see the women come in for the Champions Tribe and again pull it through. Like in general, it was the women who actually ended up sort of playing better. So for the second time in a row, the champions win the reward challenge. And I kind of forgot what the reward on this one was: fishing gear, and it was the material to make a raft. And going back to camp, again, you can see Luke is thinking ahead of the game as someone who's played the game before. He's thinking there's got to be a clue somewhere. So it's very similar to those mid-seasons in Survivor where I quite like this, and I'm kind of interested in your opinion about it. But I like the fact that you have to go dig for an idol, because in recent seasons, it seems like the idol's just being put in the tree. So you walk past it, it's like, oh yeah, it's sitting there in the tree, easy to grab. I like the fact that you actually need a clue and you need to go look for the idol and work for it a little bit. I do know that it takes a bit longer, and maybe it's more screen time, and Survivor in the US now wants idols to be quicker in play. What did you think about this throwback to how idols used to be sort of hidden?
I liked it. I agree with you completely. I think it's so much better when they're digging or they got to look, especially because there's that element of, oh, is someone going to catch them? Nowadays, someone could be standing right next to you and you can pull an idol out with them not seeing it. So I much preferred when they had to dig. And, the editors would always cut to a shot as the person was digging. They would cut to someone like lurking in the forest, even if that was taken, that shot might have been taken from like, sometimes they'll mix and match shots that were taken from different episodes to build tension. But even if that, you can look past it, because it's not only, oh, are they going to find it? It's also the element of, oh, are they going to get caught? And they have a lot. Surprisingly a large amount of times, at least in U.S. Survivor, people have been caught red-handed with idols. So, which is great, because that just continues adding that element of, will they be caught? Obviously, in this sense, I guess no. Technically, when Luke ended up finding it, he wasn't caught.
So let's talk. So let's talk through that. So Luke clearly very nervous to go and look for the idol. I think if this was US Survivor, if this was like an Adam on the island, he would have been right in there, sitting on it, getting a reason to be on there. I think he took a massive risk waiting until nighttime, because we do see the girls around the raft, and you see the idol there, which I thought was good, because otherwise people may have said, oh, it was planted there for Luke just to go and get it at the time that he went. So the clue was in the raft, at the bottom of the raft, in between one of the bamboos. So you see it on the camera clearly, where they show the girls during the day while the men go out and do fishing. They show them by the bamboo, and they show the clue being there.
I thought for sure they were going to see it. I was so surprised they did.
And
So
it adds to the suspension, right? And you're like, oh, no ways he's getting it, but no one gets it. And it was quite a funny thing there as well, with Luke being the one catching a fish when ET is the one that's got the fishing show about catching fish. But again, you see ET just being a good guy, saying, it doesn't matter who catches it, it's as long as someone catches it on the boat, that's all good. So he's got the team approach, Captain Australia kind of edit that he's getting at who he is as a person. But yeah, it was quite interesting to see that. So Luke gets David to help him look for the idol, and it was really funny that David was the person who actually spotted it as well. Like, shows that David is quite sharp and he's got an eye for these things.
yeah,
Where Luke was running like a crazy person past the tree stump with the 3 fingers a few times before they actually went and looked for it. Yeah, they balance each other really well. Like, they both have got crazy energy and are really fun. But I do think that David, more so than Luke, has got the ability to pull back and focus on the task at hand. So I think in that sense, it's a really good balance between the two of them. Now, the next immunity challenge is a really interesting challenge. It's the one where they've got to slide these massive, I don't know what to call it, like I think it's the walls that they end up hitting up. So they've got to slide these walls in the mud. And I was thinking to myself, did they actually test this thing out beforehand? Like, I mean, because to me it seemed like an impossible challenge to finish, and the whole time I was thinking, someone's like, the first time I watched it, I specifically remember thinking to myself, someone's going to get injured, because it does not look safe being in that mud whatsoever. What was your opinion about that challenge?
Yeah, I mean, well, see, I was building this opinion that, like, wow, they've really gone all out with the challenges with Australian Survivor. They seem so much more epic and intense, and not just because of the sort of like orchestral music, that's battle music that's playing the entire time. I feel like Survivor in the early days, American Survivor, wanted that's what they wanted their challenges to be. It's just, I don't know if they had the money and the production value yet to be able to build these epic challenges. And now they realized, at least in the U.S. Survivor side, it's all people really care about for the most part is strategy and what goes on right before tribal council and idols. So they've kind of toned down on the challenges a bit. And U.S. Survivor, they don't even show half the reward challenges nowadays. So it's interesting that Australian Survivor just goes all out with these epic, brutal challenges. I think, was this the one where the host said that this might have been the toughest challenge in Australian Survivor history? Yeah. So I
don't know if I agree. I don't know if I agree that it's the toughest, because they've had some really tough ones in the past as well. But I think what made it the toughest is the fact that it was so wet and the mud had that suction effect on the actual platforms being stuck to the ground. I think that's what made it extremely hard, because we only get one tribe actually completing it, and obviously being the champions tribe, and it becomes a bit of a blowout because of that. But to me, I just thought it was very interesting, very dangerous challenge. But I agree with you. I personally like the epic challenges, and I know there's a lot of people that are in the same camp as me that really like to see these epic challenges take place. But I do think that, and we'll go into that, the next reward challenge in episode 3, the amount of effort that they had to put in for that, for what they got as a reward, was just insane. I don't think it pays off, to be honest, when you look at it. But the champions tribe finally wins one, and they get the puzzle, because let's be honest, it's not even close. I did notice that Stephen, the Olympic skater, he's the one that actually sort of did the puzzle and sort of led doing all of that. So clearly he's got a bit of a mind for the puzzle, which was quite interesting. And I can't remember who was with him. I think it might have been Ross who was with him, but I don't think he added much value in actually putting it together. But he was probably the main person. So obviously the contenders go back to tribe, and now for the first time they've got to eat one of their own, and the games really start. So you've got the group of people that are together that are focusing on Baden. So you've got your Sean, Matt, Daisy, John. They're all focusing on Baden because Matt is being quite vocal that is the person to focus on. And you've got the counter group who's very aware of that group forming, starting to think, because early on Andy said Baden seems to be too smart, but he now realizes, listen, Baden is somebody I can work with and easily influence, probably, compared to Laura, who's the digital marketing manager, is her title. And we haven't spoken much about her, but she reminded me so much of my company's marketing manager as well. I don't know why, because they're both from the same, but very confident, strong woman, someone that's going to be a leader, not a follower. Again, she's just coming across as wanting to run the show. What did you think of that dynamic and sort of, the strategy that's unfolding here before Tribal?
Yeah, this vote, unlike the first one, felt like because not to go back to the first boat too much, but we haven't really seen something like that where someone was so on the bottom and kind of, took it upon herself to, almost kind of easily, shifting it to someone else in such short time like Pia did. I couldn't really think of another time in U.S. Survivor to compare that to. So the first vote definitely felt a lot different. This vote felt like
Maybe
a
Nick
typical.
Wilson. No, because was Nick Wilson in trouble early stage? But no, somebody who got medevac, and that's how he got saved, right? So a little
Yeah,
bit different.
yeah. Um, and usually, like if someone's in trouble, they maybe have like a right hand man or someone that's sort of talking to that person while they talk to that person. Pia almost seemed like she single handedly kind of did it, which is why I was so impressed by her. This vote felt a little more, typical U.S. Survivor. Not that that's a bad thing by any means, because at this point, how many people have been voted out in Survivor? You feel like you've seen it all at this point. But it's seeing the different people in those situations that makes it feel so fresh every time. So we've seen this before with like the weaker person, like Biden or Biden, Baden has seems like he's taken most of the heat, and it's slowly starting to shift, at least in the audience minds of because coming into it. I think most people thought, okay, it's Baden for sure, for sure, for sure, and they talked about him so much at the start. I was like, okay, they have to throw a curveball in here at some point, because it usually, there's no vote out there from start to finish. It's just, yep, it's this person. There's always got to be that curveball. And then when they added Laura in there, to me, it made more sense as a tribe to vote Laura out. And I hadn't seen. I don't have someone in my company that reminds me of her, so I didn't really know. I don't really have anyone that was like, oh no, not Laura. Baden was a very relatable person. Maybe not in the sense of like his story, but just in the sense that he's trying to kind of like prove something, and he's trying to be kind of like a voice for like a certain group of people, and like has more reason to come on the show than simply just I want to win. I like it when characters or people, like I said, more than characters, but come on to the show with like extra purpose. They want to do like coach and like all these characters who come on with like that extra thing. They're not just here to win. They want to prove themselves. They want to prove to their parents. They want to like be a voice. So I was happy that it ended up being Baden that state, because I feel like there's a lot more to his story that we still have yet to see. Hopefully.
Yeah. And they've done more work building his character up until this point, and we didn't really see Laura much beforehand. And if you look at it from purely just a physical aspect, and like I said to you before we even jumped on this podcast, and we did the previous one, not to always refer back to the one that we did with Rob Bentelli, go check it out if you haven't. So basically on that one there, we mentioned that the Australian Survivor seasons are something it's extremely physical in the beginning. So I feel like for older people or people who are not fit or people that are small, they really struggle in the beginning parts of Australian Survivor. So if you're someone that's a bit older, a little bit smaller, or you've got any kind of like physical disadvantage compared to other people, you're always going to get targeted early in Australian Survivor. It's just one of those things that's even harder for Cochrane or someone like that to go deep into the game.
Right.
But it does end up being quite a clear-cut vote in the end, with people switching over to Laura. No real difficulty in getting that across the line. I guess one of the things we should mention there is that Baden really made a good case in Tribal by saying, like, listen, I am doing it for people that maybe are a bit more introverted, and getting his story across. And you could see that it resonated with Matt in the Tribal, who were the main person that was opposed to Baden and wanting to get him out.
It was good stuff. It's good stuff. That's the sort of stuff Survivor's all about.
Exactly. It's about giving people a chance, and we want to see this diversity of people playing together, and people who would never meet each other in normal day life, or Matt and Baden may never have been friends in real life, but they are forced to play this game together, and let's see where that relationship goes, and if they do become friends on the show. Now, the next episode goes into the beginning of it is John talking about, the fact that everybody is a little bit down about losing that last challenge and not having had any rewards. So at the moment, you've got the Champions Tribe with 2 rewards, and one immunity win, and they haven't had any reward wins yet. So they're pretty hungry. They're starving. We did see the earlier scenes where they were trying. I think they were trying to eat raw beans, which would have been horrible because I don't think they had a fire. But John goes and gets a sea cucumber, but he also does strip down to the nude and makes a rundown. And we get Sean the horse saying he does endorses John's butt. He thinks he's got a well-proportioned butt, and he's the everyday working man over in Australia, which I found really funny. And me and you spoke about this a little bit. I don't think that in the US we see many scenes like that moving forward. The last time we saw it was Cerie, and I forgot who the person was with her that stripped down to the nude. Yeah, Shane did it, but not so. Shireen, who played in No Collar.
I think it's Cerie.
Yeah, no, so Shireen, and I forgot the guy with the beard that played with her. He did a podcast at one stage as well. Yeah,
was it?
No, not Matt. No. But it was Shireen and this other guy. In any case, they were the two that stripped down. That's the last time I remember in the US seeing that happen. Do you think we'll see things like this? It's more of a playful, fun moment, and it's still acceptable in the Australian, I guess, climate. But obviously in the US, there's been some controversial moments, and I think that there's been some very strong regulations and rules set in place after season 39. Do you think we see things like this in the future?
Not. I mean, if that sort of thing would have happened in U.S. Survivor, I feel like they would have just blurted out. I don't know if they would have eliminated that sort of thing completely. But now after season 39, and not only after the events of season 39, but people are starting to like revisit some of the events that are similar. I don't think what happened in 39 is. I don't think that sort of thing has happened previous, but similar things or claims have happened previously. And I think a lot of those moments are being like revisited, relooked at by fans and maybe by production for, who knows. But if I had to bet, I would probably say, at least for the near future, that U.S. Survivor might avoid that sort of stuff as much as they can. But yeah. So, but we'll see.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, listen, it doesn't distract or add necessarily. I think it's a funny moment, and I like seeing some of the funny moments. Just it's like Tony building a ladder to go get the breadfruit. That type of scene. It doesn't necessarily add too much to the strategy. I guess it does show that he's ingratiating himself really well with his tribe, and everybody is liking his character and who he is. Someone that can lighten the mood, because when you're out there being miserable and you're sleeping out in the cold and you're eating dry beans for dinner and supper, anybody that can lift your mood, I think, is a bonus to the job.
He was the only one that didn't mind. He's the only one that didn't mind the beans. I think he said he has beans every day at work. But the comment someone made where it looked like he was wearing a pair of white pants, that was a funny moment. That was my first laugh out loud moment for the show. Couldn't help but chuckle at that.
Yeah, so I guess the only really other big thing we see here is in the Champions tribe, we start seeing a little bit more of the dynamic between the Sporty Seven, and we see that there is a rift starting to develop between Ross and Nova, specifically around the fruit, and everybody gets a banana, and they can't have any more banana. So Ross feels like he's never been spoken to in this way, and he's older than Nova. And he's being spoken to in this way. So I think with Ross, it's quite interesting because, like I said, we see him as being this guy who does these crazy surfs and being a bit of a wild card and being born on the 6th of the 6th, 66, saying he's the devil and all that kind of stuff. He just wants to have fun and wants to play a little bit. He wants to be a little bit reckless. And someone like Luke, who's very good at observing people socially and how they're connecting with each other, he definitely notices that and he says, I'm going to pounce on that. And there's this great scene. My favorite scene in the first 3 episodes is Luke and Ross having that sit down outside in the night and Luke saying to him, I think that you should prove your loyalty to me by going and stealing a banana for us so that we can have it together. That's how you prove your loyalty. And Ross being game, wanting to be part of the mischievous side, and he goes and steals it. What did you think about Luke and that dynamic and how he took opportunity of that there? What's your general thoughts about that scene?
Yeah, I like this scene a lot. I hadn't really seen. Is his name Ross? Is that how you pronounce it?
It's Ross, yeah.
Ross, yeah. We'd seen him a lot, but I hadn't really got a good feel for him. So when Luke kind of gave us his interpretation of him, I was like, okay, let's see if he's right. And I do think that his interpretation was accurate, and that sort of playful banter that Luke has with him. I think that was the moment where I realized, okay, I like Luke, because I was following him and I definitely was invested in his story, but I wasn't sure if I liked him yet because I was just seeing so much of him. I was like waiting for a moment that I could be like, okay, I like Luke. And I think this was that moment where I was finally like, okay, I really like this guy. So I'm interested. Luke's definitely one of the people I'm most interested for sure, to see how he plays out for the rest of the season, and to meet him too, because he'll be coming on the show in a couple episodes as one of our guests. So I'll be coming back for that one later on. The episode he gets knocked out.
So I think with Luke, I think one of his superpowers in the game, like he said, the previous time he played, he never had an idol. So this time he found the idol for the first time. So it shows you he's someone that doesn't need the idol to go deep in the game. His social game is his super strength. He's a super social player. He gets the dynamics between different people, what makes them tick. He can relate with anyone. And I mean, coming into this, he had to relate with people who are kind of celebrities, who are older than him. He was the outcast from the start. So I said I was super nervous for him coming in that spot of the only survivor player, because we know how it played out the previous season. It didn't work really well in that dynamic. So I think he did really well here. And I think that him spotting this is a game changer, and it brings Ross in, because clearly Ross wants to be part of the fun group. He's not part of the fun group. He's part of the old group, and he's a kid at heart. In an adult body, basically, Ross, that is. So we also see a little bit that Abby and Dave continues to get closer, but Abby is also starting to feel like she's voting with these guys, but she doesn't have a voice and she doesn't get to get her opinion out, which I think is something we see a lot in Survivor, where big groups sometimes forget that you have to make everybody together sort of a part of the conversation. And one of the things that really stood out for me, and I'm going to skip to the end because I don't want to forget this, was when Steve said in the tribal that they go to later on in the episode that he didn't really talk to everyone. He didn't really talk to Abby before a couple of hours ago or on that day or something like that. And I was like, you're in an alliance with Abby and you're like day, 8 or 9, and you've only now spoken to her. No wonder it didn't work out well for the Sporty 7 at the end of the day, because you can't just put something in place and expect everybody to stick together. It's one of the big reasons Big Brother alliances never work on day one as well, because they just don't put the effort in later on or talk to each other, and then it falls apart, So really interesting there. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about the scenes that we see there in the only other thing that we could probably talk about is Janine, because they give us a little bit more of a background of what she does on an everyday job, being the owner of Juice. And, this is for her like a great escape from having to deal with mergers and acquisitions and corporate. I can definitely relate being in the corporate world. Sometimes you just want to take a break. So I think she comes across as someone that they're starting to build her character. We're going to see more of her in the future, but clearly she is someone that's a very strong woman, someone that is also used to being in control. But I think the thing that she does very different from Anastasia, who is that similar type of character, is she knows how to stay calm and not be too bossy at times. I think she's really good at that at this stage in the game. Do you have any thoughts about Janine and what you've seen up until now?
I think I was what you just said about Janine is pretty similar to my thoughts of her. I like her. I think she's sort of in that underdog, like a bottom of the numbers rule. There's always, naturally going to be those people that are like down at the bottom. But there's always a couple of them where you like are hoping that they can somehow manage to work their way up. So Janine is definitely in that position. At least for me, I want to see her make it far in this game, because I like her. Normally like the CEO, like boss type person, I never like. I forget her name, but the one woman in Millennials and Gen X, like that sort of CEO boss type lady. I seem to never ever like that person. I guess Kim, Kim Spradlin, she owns a wedding dress or a bridal shower bit type business. Maybe she was the one exception in U.S. Survivor, but no, I definitely I want to see Janine at this point. I personally want to see Janine make it far.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I forgot who the lady was that didn't want to give her jacket.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, she was a big character, and she was funny to watch. Actually, you see, I like the characters, so I really enjoyed that because it brought some drama to that show. But
I like the moment.
Yeah, 100%. I wouldn't, if I was on the island with her, I'd absolutely hate it. But I love seeing her on the island with other people and antagonizing them and giving them a hard time. But yeah, so we go into the reward challenge, and this reward challenge is probably one of the more simple reward challenges that we've seen up to this point. Where it actually reminds me of the hall brawl that we see. And I know you're not a challenge fan, but on the challenge we get a hall brawl, which you can't actually physically get past each other. You've got to run through each other to get the bell on the other side. But in this case, it's a little bit wider, so you can dodge or sidestep past the person to get to the other side. But it becomes, I guess, one of those challenges where the contenders actually stand up, and Baden has probably got the biggest moment on this one, as the person who actually gets past Ross, I believe it was, to get to the other side, buzzes through, gets the bell, and you can see how much it means to him in the tribe that he's proven himself after they've kept him the previous round. So his one stood out for me, and then the second one that stood out for me was the rivalry between Matt and Luke Toki that continues to happen. They continue to be the matchup, and this time Luke absolutely bodies him as he goes through and gets the win. So now the score is 1-2, and Matt really, really hated the fact that he lost against Luke here. And I thought Luke was pretty gracious in winning that. He didn't go off on Matt like Matt would have done if he won against Luke. So it shows a different approach by the two. Is there anything else around the challenge that you wanted to comment, or anything that stood out for you on this?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the Baden win, I think, was kind of like the moment of the challenge. It would have been really epic if that was like the winning, the winning moment. It kind of happened halfway through. I know Luke came back and did another one and lost that one,
Yes.
Which is tough because Luke seems to be the most well-rounded player, and of course he's played already, so he knows how the game works better than anyone out there.
It's interesting how they keep going. It's interesting for me how they keep going to him all the time here in the early days. And one of the things Luke does really well is that he doesn't shy away from it. He doesn't shy away from the responsibility. He's more than happy to go up there and be the person to take on the most physically dominant player in the game, which is Sean, aka the Horse. I believe they haven't given him that name up to this point yet, but that is going to become his name in the game.
I was wondering why you were calling him that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's his nickname later on, but he's a very physical player. And we also find out that he is a retired AFL player. So it does make me wonder if he was always going to be in the Champions tribe, and then last minute when they got Luke confirmed, they just put him in the Contenders tribe because he kind of doesn't fit in with the Contenders. They did make it the whole thing. Yeah, he never actually went to a final and won, and that's the reason that he's a contender. But he was a professional sports player, and you can see why. You know what I mean? So he's kind of out of place in that tribe. But I guess it at least gives them. Sorry.
For 12 years, I think they said he was a professional sports player. Yeah. It seemed like he hasn't lost his step as far as his physicality, at least compared to an average person. But yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I think it does help them a little bit. It gives them at least a chance against some of these champions. But,
exactly. Yeah. That's what I was thinking. Yeah. So it's a way to sort of make it a little balanced. Yeah.
Exactly. So at the end of the day, they won a reward challenge. Now I didn't write down all the different items that were in the box, but I remember being underwhelmed the first time I saw it, and I was definitely underwhelmed the second time I saw it. It's I guess the really cool thing to the reward challenges is that they have to select one person to hand out everything to people, and I think that for anybody but John, that could have been a detrimental thing to be the person to actually hand it out. But he does make it quite a joke of it and laughs and gives people gifts and tells a little bit of a story as to why he's doing it, and it seems to be in general going down pretty well. And he recognizes that you don't want to be that guy, but I don't think that it hurt John's game at all in this case.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. If anything, I think people, if anything, I personally I liked him more for it, and I feel like everyone else was like having a good time, having a fun time as he was handing out the items. It was weird. I feel like, yeah, like you said, anyone else on that tribe, I feel like it might have hurt your game. Like I mentioned earlier, it's like in Survivor, like it seems like every little thing you say or do, can either helps your game or hurts your game. Like nothing is just said. Everything is either said, for the positive or for the negative. So this sort of thing usually, no matter what, you don't want to be in this position, but he definitely made the best of it, and yeah. So yeah.
So they go back to the Champions tribe, and they show more of the dynamic between Dave and and Luke and Abby and Ross, and how they're continuing to work that relationship. Clearly, Dave and Luke are the two people at this stage that are, at least from what we can see, in that minority alliance that are working the hardest and getting those two people over. And they both recognize that they're in big trouble if they don't manage to pull it off, because one of them will be going home if they do go back to a tribal. There's nothing new kind of that happens there. So me and you've touched upon kind of what the dynamic is there quite a bit. So I think we do move on to the immunity challenge, which ends up being a physical challenge with a throwing target at the end again. So they've got to go through these obstacle course kind of again, build the bridge ladder to get over it. And at the end, they've got the sticks with the podiums, and you've got to throw the sandbag on the stick. And again, we see at the end there, Andy has just got the arm for it, him being the person that trained. Every time he steps up at this point, he is pulling it off. So in my mind, his stock for these first 3 episodes within that Contenders tribe must be at an all-time high.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And they were holding it, and they were holding the sticks too. It wasn't like they were just placed. You know, they were wobbling. So him landing them as much as he did is super impressive. You would think he was like a athlete. Like you would think he's just like a a natural athlete. But it's so interesting that the guy in the Contenders tribe that seems to be their kind of top guy in the challenges is what is he? Technically, he's a marketing executive. That's what he's listed as. But so that's interesting. Not that he's the only one that's performing well, but it seems like he's
got different skills.
Definitely.
Like he's all those the end ones that makes you either a hero or a zero. He's pulling those ones out, and he's looking bloody good doing it. And I think the thing that makes him get away with it up until this point is the fact that he did say that he's a bit of a golfer and he writes golfing blogs, and people probably thought maybe that skill, hand-eye coordination with the golfing and stuff is helping him, because for me it would have been super suspicious seeing this guy just pulling it off. But in some ways he's doing everything right at this point, but is he putting a target on himself as being someone that is really good at these challenges? Because everybody's looking at everyone and saying, do I want to go up against that guy later in the game when it becomes an individual game? So it's so hard to get that balance right between being the hero for your tribe and also not being the biggest threat going into the merge. So that's the one thing that he needs to continue to look out for in this stage in the game. But that's the main thing sort of in the challenge. I think that obviously the other thing that stood out was that Janine had a strategy for how they needed to go under the poles in the beginning. And her strategy, instead of just digging one hole that you go through in a vertical way, she wanted them to go underneath the pole in a horizontal way and dig. And it doesn't seem that strategy is the one that ends up working really well for them. Even the first time I watched it, I thought that's a bit strange. You probably just go straight under it, because I've never seen anyone do the horizontal strategy in any of the Survivor seasons that I've seen for that. So that kind of stands out. So going back to camp, Janine becomes the target of the Sporty 7. And they're saying that, listen, she's not really adding much value at this stage, and her strategy's been off. So she seems to be the person that they're more targeting. So again, even though it's not being shown to us on TV, it shows that Pia has ingratiated herself enough with that Sporty 7 through Nova and Susie that she's not the automatic first choice that they're starting to think about and target at this point. So I think that's quite interesting. And when you look at the other side, obviously, Luke and your Dave, they continue to work very hard on flipping people around. And Abby, at this point, she's trying to get her opinion across, and she thinks that Susie is holding them back. Susie is the weakest one in the group at the moment, but she's not being heard. She's not being asked about her opinion. And obviously, with Dave and Luke talking to her, they figure out that Susie is the one that she wants to go for, and they get everybody, Pia, Janine, Dave, to get onto Susie, and they say, listen, what if we can get Ross over as well? And we flip the vote here. And Luke very much realizes that this will be the game of the move that will either set him up or break him for the rest of the season in regards to if he can make this flip happen. Because obviously if he can get these two people to flip, it may be very hard for them to go back. And you do have Abby talking about the fact that it's a hard choice for her, because she's got so much trust and respect at the moment within that Sporty 7 that to go against that would be a massive break of trust, and we do see it in the earlier seasons with the Australians. If you break trust, it's very hard to go back on that. So very interesting dynamics. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up about the dynamics happening here before they go into tribal?
Well, this was so the first 3 episodes to me. This is the best part. This is really good stuff. I mean, this sort of stuff is what makes, in my opinion, Survivor just leagues ahead on TV, and just really brings out the best that this show has to offer. When there's a group of what is it, 5 or 4 that are on the bottom, and then they're going up a
Four.
is it 4 against 7? Yeah,
Yeah.
4 against 7, and then they realize, it's not like they just have to swing one vote; they have to get 2 people. So they kind of a plan that sort of had really gone back to the last episode when Luke was sort of having those fun moments with Ross. He sort of saw him as the person who would most likely kind of come with the young guys, and like sort of planted those seeds in the last episode, just like David sort of planted the seeds with what's her name,
Abby.
With who?
Abby.
With Abby, yeah, with Abby. Sort of like the flirty part, and then like they kind of switch roles, and like Luke's talking to Abby, and it's just a plan that the plan in short was to switch the numbers, right? When you stretch out the plan, all these different parts it was like a checklist of all these things they had to check, and you could almost kind of build that checklist from the start of episode 2, and obviously we're talking about episode 3 now. It kind of transfers into that, and it's just interesting that just one by one all those moments get checked off, and then tribal council happens, and it's like, okay, we checked all of our to-do list off. Now is our plan going to work? And obviously the votes switch to the sense where Susie gets voted off, which was a little unfortunate personally, because she was one of my favorites on the Champions. I liked her. She reminded me of Tina a little bit, except she's obviously a bit more accomplished in her life. Not that Tina's not like an accomplished as far as like fame and sort of like the physical feats that she's been able to accomplish. And obviously Tina winning Survivor is a huge accomplishment. Spoilers if you haven't seen American Survivor season 2, but I really liked Susie, her just calm, motherly like demeanor, very chill. She kind of felt like a young vibe to her. I'm almost a little surprised they didn't target her to kind of want to come with the young crowd. But if it was up to her and Ross, I get why they targeted Ross. But yeah, it was really, really good stuff. Of the 3, I watched all 3 episodes today, back to back to back. And the scenes pre-tribal council in episode 3 was really, really good stuff.
What did you think of David's strategy to go to Susie and tell her before the tribal council that we're voting for you?
I mean, I wasn't expecting it. I think I'm still waiting to see, like, long term, what the payoff of that particular move is. I mean, they did vote for her, and it did obviously end up working for him in the end. So I guess I can't like deduct points from how much I like David, but I
like David as a player, but to me it seemed like a very big risk to take. To tell someone who you're voting for ahead of time, you give her the opportunity to circle back and do damage control with whoever she needs to, because it's not going to be a blind side. And then secondly, you can't bank on the fact that there's just one idol, because even in Australian Survivor, you do have more than one idol in play at times in the same camp. So I feel like David coming into this one, I love him as a character, but I do feel like he played for the TV moment there a little bit, and I think that he's playing a very risky game at this stage by doing that kind of thing. But also, as the game progresses, we'll see how David's character evolves, and obviously what's going to happen moving forward and how that plays into the game. But he is known for being a ballsy player. So for me, it was a little bit of an unnecessary risk to do that this early in the game.
Yeah.
So we go into tribal, and I think the other thing that sort of stood out for me, like I mentioned, Steven was the one person that said, listen, I didn't even speak to Abby before maybe like a couple of hours ago or something like that, which was a shock. It made me understand why Abby wanted to leave that alliance and didn't stay there. It was probably Janine's fighting spirit again in this tribal. I don't think that anybody saves themselves within a tribal. I think most cases the decision is already made prior to going to tribal, and people don't really deviate from it. But she did make a really good case in regards to, her strengths being the fact that it's all been physical at this stage. She hasn't had the ability to show what strengths she has and what she can bring to the table from the smart side. They haven't done puzzles or anything like that. And I believe, I can't remember if it was Janine or Pia, but one of them said, like when you're in a champions tribe, you're against a bunch of athletes. So even if you're someone that's super fit in your everyday life, you don't stack up to that same physicality as some champions. But I did find it interesting that Janine, because to me, she looks really in shape. And she looks really good for being an older woman, to be honest. And she ended up training with a Navy SEAL before coming on to Survivor to get ready, which I thought was pretty interesting, that she's done a lot of preparation coming into the show. I believe she's also someone that said in the beginning she's a massive fan of the show. So there is a few people on that tribe that actually have seen the show and are fans of the show coming into this. So they kind of know what to say. Ross's tribal answers to Jonathan is really interesting, where he says, like, listen, I'm just going to go on intuition and I'm going to do whatever I want to do. I'm not going to be controlled in regards to how I vote. It tells you once again that Ross is going to be a wild child. He doesn't want to be controlled. He doesn't want to be told. And if I was any of the Sporty Seven at that stage, I would have been nervous as to where his vote was going to end up landing at the end. And the big thing that Janine said, I did make a note of this, is she really hammered on the fact that she's fiercely loyal and that the people that stick with her, she's going to stick with them in the game, and the game is about numbers. So I think those are the key points that she sort of brought out within their tribal. And Abby mentions she's 50-50 even up until that point, and she could go one way or the other way. And Steve says that if you make a move this early, you're disloyal and you're burnt to the tribe. So already selling her, it's going to be this. So it must be music to Luke's ears, hearing that if Abby comes with me, she's burned to the other seven, so I can continue to work with her, and I've got her for myself to use further in the game. Ultimately, it is Susie who goes home in this spot. Is there anything that Susie could have done differently to stay in the game that she maybe didn't do?
I mean, yeah, I guess technically there's a lot of things. I mean, she obviously could have found the idol clue and look for the idol, but obviously Luke got to it first. I just think she was a little more comfortable, and I than she probably should have been, and I sort of get it. I mean, the Alliance of Seven appeared to be strong for the ones who ultimately didn't end up flipping. And it wasn't just seven people. Like, they had that thing that bonded them together, being like, former sport athletes. It wasn't like they were just seven people, having that extra thing that bonds you together, sort of, in theory could be the glue that holds everyone together. Obviously it was not. No surprise, because it's just so hard for alliances more than like 3 or 4 people to stick together, because as much as people can say that it's a democracy and that everyone's voice is equal, there's always going to be at least 1 or 2, sometimes 3 people at the top and you're a couple people at the bottom. So I think Susie needed to pick that up more. I think she was just too comfortable. I don't think you should be paranoid and freak out as much as some people do in the early episodes. But I also don't think you can get too comfortable. And I think we kind of saw the two different. I think Anastasia kind of fell under that ultra paranoid sense that hurt her game, whereas Pia was a bit more laid back and whereas Susie, I think, got too comfortable. So it's interesting that the first couple episodes we've got those two different dynamics. But I do think you need to be a little comfortable in the sense that you have to trust the people that are around you, and you do have to be a little paranoid in the sense that you can never trust anyone, and you always got to be on your toes. But I feel like that balance needs to be there, and I feel like that balance just wasn't there for Susie. So I don't consider this one a blind side. The second one. I also don't think was that much of a blindside, even though I do think when the episode started and when the Contenders lost, I was almost positive Baden was going to be the one to go home. But I wouldn't say there's any blindsides for the audience yet. I think obviously the majority alliance, some of those guys were blindsided this episode, but it was Susie. Susie today.
So who would you say, as closing sort of comments on this, who would you say are the player to watch out for at the moment in the Champions tribe, and who's the player to watch out for in the Contenders tribe from what you've seen in the first three episodes?
It would probably have to be Luke, and even without the idol, I'd probably still say Luke. I just feel like he's formed really good bonds with everyone. He's obviously already coming in with that prior knowledge of how the game works. And then on the Contenders tribe, Matt, I would say is maybe the player to watch. He just seems to understand the game and how it works better than everyone else. And he's, again, I feel like he has that a good balance right now with not being too paranoid and not being too comfortable. I think he wants to. I feel like he's like Tony on Winners at War. Like he wants to play. He wants to go crazy.
Are you talking about Matt or are you talking about Andy? Because Andy is the super fan, the one that's the golf blog. Yeah, so Andy, I was just gonna say, Matt. Like I was with you on Luke. I was like, when you went to Matt, I'm like, okay, you're going. I'm trying to find out why you're putting him, because Matt, obviously, great character, really physical, but he hasn't shown us the strategic thinking yet. And I agree with you. Yeah. At this point, Andy has been very strong. He's done everything that he said he should do. He's stepped up for his team when he's needed to step up, and he's controlled that frantic energy that he has up until this point. And it's very hard for a super fan to do. We know that a lot of super fans can't do that when they go into the game and they end up getting voted out pretty quickly. So I'm in agreement with you on that. Okay, so guys, if you got to 1 minute of 1 hour and 24 minutes into this podcast, we thank you for being around and listening to this. It's much appreciated. We've got plenty of content coming your way for the Survivor Global show on Reality Pop. We're going to be doing episodes 4 and 5 on Sunday if you're in Australia or New Zealand or South Africa, and on Saturday if you're over in the States. So I will be joined by the lovely Chantel Francis, who you would have seen on some of these shows before already, and she's also doing our Big Brother recaps on The Block with Reality Pop, which you should look out for if you're a Big Brother Canada fan. She will be joining me to talk about the Australian Survivor, so I'm really excited to talk about that. So keep on the lookout for that. Adam, what have you got planned, and what is coming up next with the Survivor Buffs?
Yes, so Gideon is actually moving up to New York City on Thursday. So I'll be joined, instead of Gideon, I'll be joined by Trev. He might have seen on 2 of our Survivor panels, as well as Justin, who was on, I believe, our first Survivor Buffs episode. So we're just going to have a friendly talk about some Survivor, some of the recent winners. And we have some interviews coming up soon with T-Bird. We got Terry Dietz we're interviewing soon. So some interviews coming up we're super excited for sure.
Oh, that is exciting. So, guys, we are working really hard behind the scenes to make this content as good as possible for you. We're trying to get some really good guests lined up for international and global Survivor to come on the show. We've got plans to do a lot more in Reality Pop moving forward. You can get in touch with us. Let us know if you're interested in joining the team. We're constantly growing. And Adam, what's the email address there that they can send that to?
Yeah, so it's realitypopnetwork@gmail.com.
Yep. So send us an email if you're interested in joining the team. We're always interested in knowing what other talent is out there that have got the same crazy obsession that we do with reality TV in general. If you do like what we're doing, please subscribe. Please hit the notification bell so that you can be informed whenever we go live or do any of these things. And please leave a comment. Let us know what you liked about the show and what you would, who do you think? Do you think myself and Adam were completely wrong for 1 hour and 26 minutes and we just wasted our time? Or, do you agree on some of the things that we've just said? We really appreciate you for being here with us this late into the show, and we look forward to talking to you next time. See ya. Bye.